Whether it be on the streets, broadcasting in the news, or all over social media, Black Lives Matter is a movement that is making its presence known all over the world. Founded on July 13, 2013, prior to the death of Trayvon Martin, a 17-year-old African American who was shot down by a police officer because he looked suspicious for wearing a hoodie when all he was doing was walking back home from buying in Arizona and a bag of Skittles. The movement was made for a strive for change, so that no mother would have to feel the pain that Martin's mother had to feel. But sadly, this pain continues on as many Black African Americans families have to deal with the loss of their loved ones due to police brutality and racial injustice. The more we continue to push for change, the more we manifest it into reality. Become an advocate for Black Lives Matters lost due to racial injustice. Become an advocate to reduce racial profiling in America, and become an advocate to make a difference for the Black community. The Black community is hurting from all the deaths of its members and is becoming more frequent and more unjust. The impact of Trayvon Martin had on the United States of America was one that struck the Black community hard, because not only was Trayvon Martin just a Black individual shot again, but Trayvon Martin was a teenager. Trayvon Martin, the whole idea behind his case was because of the officer just thought he looked suspicious, he decided instead of using his backup from the police officers, he decided to take it into his own hands. Because of that, the Black community lost another son, another brother, and another change for a future. Another case from Black Lives Matter was Tamir Rice. Worse than Trayvon Martin, Tamir Rice was 12 years old, playing at a playground when he had a plastic gun, and a police officer took that as a threat. Let me say that one more time. A 12-year-old boy with a water gun was a threat to a full adult male. It's pretty outstanding that another mother lost her son, but that's just what the Black community has to deal with on a daily basis. In a quote from The Case of the 12-Year-Old Boy, or The Silence and Relevance to Leisure Research by Russell Mowat, the death of a child, especially in a location of play, should be enough to shock and remind us of the very real and very structural and very systematic nature of racism, and that unlike racial discrimination, racism is quite legal. Not only can you advocate for the lives that have been taken, you can advocate for the lives that are still dealing with racial profiling in America. The whole idea behind racial profiling often leads to the mass incarceration that we have in America. For the United States of America, we are the leading factor for mass incarceration and that of African Americans. A lot of the times, Black people are seen as a threat because either they have a hoodie on or they're dealing with the racial stigma of being dangerous and incompetent and just not welcome in the society. A lot of the times, because of that racial stigma, we see African American males as not being able to properly provide for their families because they walk away or they're never there. But a lot of the times that's not true. When a Black family finds out that their father has left, they always think the worst, that stereotype that the father went for the milk, but they never returned. A lot of the times, because of racial profiling, African American males, teenager to full adults, are being swept off of the streets by police officers because they look like another criminal that they're searching for. And there's that word, criminal. African Americans all over the world have to deal with that world because they look like a criminal based on their appearance and their skin color. Our skin color is seen as a threat and as a weapon, but it shouldn't have to be that way. While reading Trayvon Martin's Racial Profiling, Black Male Stigma and Social Work Practice by Marteau Lee Tisley, Jerome Scheel, and Charles Adams, and Matthew Okinawa, the stigmatization of Black men in America as violent and dangerous, indolent, non-achieving, and criminal has created a context in which many Black men, particularly those of low income status, are viewed as suspicious in a variety of social encounters. While becoming an advocate for Black Lives Matter and reducing racial profiling in America, you can also become an advocate to make a difference for the Black community. Ways you can do that, which is very prevalent now, is protesting, but protesting the right way. A lot of the times over social media and in the news, you can see that protesting is seen as something that leads to riots, but not all the time the riots aren't caused by the protesters. Recently, we found out that many of the rioters in protests are actually undercover cops that are hired to take down a lot of the protesters and also create damage around them. So it looks like the protesters are doing it, but they don't showcase that a lot of them are just peaceful with all people of different colors are coming together and becoming one for this matter. You can also, if you don't want to protest or put your life at a risk or get injured like that, you can also sign petitions and give donations. Many big creators in the industry have links in their profiles that you can click on and donate, and that would help the Black community. From the Black Lives Matter movement on police brutality by Brian Cham, it has inspired a new generation of activists who are able to critically analyze the historical and contemporary ravages of racism, persistent structural inequality, mass incarceration, police brutality, and high levels of Black unemployment, and reignite a broader push for Black liberation. But while protesting and doing all this for Black Lives Matter is seen as a good thing, a lot of the times it can also be seen as in bad light because of its views on what activism and protesting can have on relationships. While activism is seen as a good use for change, there are usually some negative connotations like how protesting and activism can change relationships. A quote from the Biological Consequences of Protest and Activism, a systematic review in new typology by Sarah Verstrin and John Bury. However, activism can lead to the erasing of old relationships, such as ties with old friends due to them being on the other side. We get positive feedback from peers in the same peer groups, but when there's an opposition and strains, it can strain the relationship that may lead to dissolving the actual relationship in itself. Now, when you think of Black Lives Matter, there's always that one name that you remember it by. The name that I remember it by is Elijah McClain. 2 weeks ago, Elijah McClain was walking home from playing violin to kittens at his massage therapist job. He was stopped by police because of his face mask that he used to protect himself. He was seen as a threat. Elijah McClain, 23 years old. Elijah McClain, during his arrest, said that he was different from the rest of the Black community, that he didn't do any of those types of things. And he cried for his life. They choked him to death, and at the same time, they admitted him with ketamine, which is it's a shot that basically kills you. It's like a higher form of anesthesia. And they put that in him before the paramedics came so that he would die faster. Another life added to the never-ending list of Black Lives Matter. Another mother that mourns her son, and another need for change. Breonna Taylor was only 26 years old when she was killed in her own bed. In the Black Lives Matter, Culturally Sustaining Responsive and Relevant Pedagogy by Eric Jackson, he states the Black Lives Matter movement reached a higher level of visibility in its response to the 2014 death of Michael Brown, a teenager who was killed by a local police officer of Ferguson Police Department in Missouri. It's bad enough that adults in the Black community are dying, but it's also children who are dying too. Black Lives Matter is more than a hashtag. It's become a need for change. You should advocate to the lives lost due to racial injustices in America, and advocate for the racial profiling in America to end. And you should advocate to make a difference for the Black community. This change is not going to happen easily. That's why we all need to support each other to start saving lives and learning to appreciate the lives of one another. Thank you. Are there any questions?
Yeah, I got a question. My camera's acting up. I don't know what's going on. But so I don't know. This is like a bit of a deep question, but would you recommend that, like, if someone feels like they're being, or like, let's say, racially like judged or possibly going to be attacked or something, that they should pull out their phone and record anything that could happen to them?
My standpoint on that is pull it out before, like, so a lot of the times, like, I'm on TikTok because I have nothing to do with my life most of the time. But during the peak of what happened with the George Floyd protests and everything, if you were getting pulled over, the videos they showed that you would pull out your phone before an officer came up to your car so that you would be recording the whole thing. So for me, I'd say yes, pull it out, but like don't pull it out in the heat of the moment, because like what happened recently, I actually forgot his name, but he had the phone in his hand and they assumed it was a gun and they shot him down. So I would say take it out when like the feeling is safe, but don't take it out like during the time that you're being interrogated or being like put in handcuffs. So yeah. So any other questions? No? Okay. Thank you. Oh, did you have a question, Caleb?
Yeah. Have you been to a lot of protests recently?
So I come from, so I'm part Black, I'm half Black, but I was raised with my mom and my stepdad who are white and Asian, because like I'm Filipino and white also. And they, like, my parents do not see me as Black, which it's really hard for me, especially since I'm the president of BSU. So how can the president of BSU not be seen Black and supported by our own family? And because of that, they would not let me go to protests. And my job also, before this, like, they didn't care. They were just like, okay, whatever. If you're gonna call in, just do it. Like, we don't need you anyways. But I needed to come in, because if not, then I would get more heat on it. But my friends have been to protests, and definitely it started out as peaceful in downtown, but then a lot of the police officers were starting to use tear gas and rubber bullets, like, even though nothing violent was even going on, like they were sparking the violence. And you know, it's hard to see that in my community where I live. So, but there's nothing we can do but just keep striving for change. Can you guys hear that? The timer? Fuck. I mean, shoot. Ah. Okay, but I'm done. If there's no questions, we good? Yes. Okay.